Hello and welcome to Wellington Place Apiary. I'm Bill the beekeeper, and I'm going to do my normal inspection of a hive that I would do if you weren't here. We've got questions coming along at any time you want to ask them, so we're just going to do what I would normally do. The bees have been here for about 10 years, and the hive we're going to look at, this is the hardest bit of beekeeping, by the way. The hive we're going to look at has maybe 25,000, 30,000 bees in. We'll have a look at the place where the bees do their breeding and see if we can find the queen and see if they've made us any honey. Wellington Place honey is absolutely gorgeous, and it's a very productive place to keep bees as well. So we'll see how we go. What I'm doing now is just preparing a smoker. Smoke calms the bees, and what it does is make them think that they may have to move house because there's a fire, and so they stuff themselves with honey. And if they stuff themselves with honey, they are hopefully less likely to sting me. So we'll have a go and see. Good to go. Let's have a look in the hive. So this is a standard national hive. What we're going to do is just put a little bit of smoke in the front. And you'll see that we're not trying to smoke them out, we're just trying to calm them down a little bit. Having done that, we take the roof off. The roof goes on the floor upside down because that gives us somewhere to put everything. On this hive I've got an empty honey box. You can see that it's a small box. It's got honeycomb ready made in, a couple of bees on it. These are all girls. Most of the bees you'll see are girls. If we find some boys, I'll point them out to you. So the bees hopefully will fill that in autumn with full of. We get most of our honey here in autumn from the balsam along the river and the other plants along the river. This is called a crown board. It's the ceiling of the hive. So the girls are up here, and you can see they've made a bit of wax on it, but it's just the roof of the hive. Another honey box. Bees are very good at gluing things in. So again, these are all worker bees, and they're busily putting a little bit of nectar in the comb. Not a great deal yet. You can see a little bit of nectar in those, the shiny liquid in there. So they collect nectar from flowers, reduce it by about 90%, and it becomes honey, mixed with a few enzymes from their stomachs. So that box is going to come off, and we do have to break the glue they use to stick everything. Now this bit of metal is called a queen excluder. It keeps the queen down there because I don't want her babies in my honey. So this is just a way of keeping the queen down there. The girls can get through, the boys and the queen can't. So that just comes off. Carefully without flipping bees all over the place. And this is where the bees live and breed. This first one is a dummy board, so that's nothing, it's just filling a space. The second frame, you can see these frames are bigger than the super frames. There's a bee there with some pollen on its legs. Just in there. Don't know what sort of pollen that is, but most of this is nectar on its way to becoming honey. And there's a boy. So that's a boy. You see, big, heftier, and boys are good because boys don't sting, only the girls sting. Another boy. Come on, in there. So that's a boy. In fact, two boys talking to one another. The girls make boys in spring, and then in autumn, when boys are no longer needed, they throw them out to die. It's a hard life being a male bee. So, not a lot other than honey on that frame. Next frame. You can see stored pollen hopefully in there. You can see where they've stored the pollen inside there. It's a sort of greeny, pale greeny grey colour. Some yellow there. Some crystalline honey up at the top there. But again, most of these are females and no babies on this frame at all. If the camera is really good, at the bottom of these cells you might see a little white lozenge, like a little white torpedo, and that's a bee egg. Very difficult to see, so I'm not sure if we can see those or not. So the queen will back into these cells, and in this cell she'll lay a female egg. If we can find some bigger cells, not on here, if she backs into a bigger cell, she'll lay a boy egg. So the queen can choose what sort of eggs she's going to lay, boys or girls. Don't think she's on here, just have a quick look. No, can't see her anywhere. So that one goes back in. Notice we always hold the frames above the hive. I learnt that the hard way when I dropped the frame and killed a queen. So this way, if the queen drops off, she drops into the hive. Again, here we have, so a honeybee goes from egg to larva, caterpillar sort of stage, and then it pupates just like a butterfly. So in here, the larvae are pupating, and out of each of those cells, an adult bee will emerge. So they have exactly the same life cycle as a butterfly, but it's all done in here. So when the larva is full and big, it spins a cocoon, the worker bees cover it with wax, and it turns into an adult. Let's see if we can find any larvae in there as well. This area here, you'll see the little white larvae all curled up on their sides. So the egg hatches, it turns into a larvae or mini caterpillar, eats and eats and eats and eats and eats until it fills the cell, then it pupates and turns into an adult. So we've got that. What else can we see on here? Lots of eggs there, so the queen has been here recently, but can't see the queen anywhere. Another one with pollen on, lovely bright orangey pollen there. So when they visit a plant, they collect two things. They collect nectar, which is their carbohydrate, their sugars and starches, and they collect pollen, which is their protein, their fats, the minerals, the vitamins, everything else in the diet. So there's about 1,500 bees on here. Almost all of them female. And can't see the queen on there either. So we'll move on. So again, lots and lots of capped cells, lots of pupae, some eggs. When the bees first build this comb, it's pure white, and as they use it and it gets trampled on more and more, it gets darker and darker and eventually will go black. So this is coming up to the point where I'd like to replace this fairly soon with new fresh frames so they can stay healthy. Just looking to see if we can find one doing a waggle dance, because what they do is when they find a nice food source, they dance to one another to tell the other bees how far to go, which direction to go, and what food we can find. Some nice big larvae in there. I don't know if you can see those okay. Lots of big white larvae in there. So, queen's doing quite well. What we as beekeepers do is provide a home for the bees and look after them and treat them for any disease. We make sure that they have enough honey to survive the winter, and then we take any excess. So it's really a partnership with the bees. And where any honey we take is only excess honey. Still can't see a queen. There she is. And you see how we put a green dot on her so that we can find her easily. I'll just move some bees from around her. There she is. Come on, stop hiding. So that's the queen. And all she's literally doing is wandering around looking for places to lay eggs. She doesn't feed herself. She's got attendants that feed her. She doesn't clean herself. She's got attendants do that. She's even got attendants who will take her poo away for her. So all she's doing is wandering around, and at peak lay she'll lay about 3,000 eggs a day. So just imagine 3,000 babies a day. That's it, come on, out you come. So and you can see why we put a coloured dot on, because finding her amongst this lot, she's not that much different to the rest of them, is easy. That green dot tells me that she was born last year. We have a different colour for each in a 5-year cycle. So it goes, will you raise good bees? So we can tell that that's last year. This year she would have a blue dot on. So we're happy, we've found a queen, we've seen the queen, and more importantly, the bees are not making new queens. If the bees were making new queens, then we'd soon have a swarm, because that girl would fly off with half the bees to set up a new colony. Just check the rest of the frames. All healthy. I don't know if we can see that one cell there. That's going to have a boy coming out of it. You can see how much bigger, and it stands proud of the others. So all of these ones, girls, will emerge, female. Those two males will emerge. Those ones, males, will come out of. And as I said, the queen chooses to lay boys or girls. She does that because when she goes on a mating flight at the beginning of her life, she will mate with 20-odd males, and that's it. She'll just store the sperm for the rest of her life. When she backs into a small cell, she releases an egg and one sperm. They fertilise, and that's going to be a female. If she backs into that cell, she'll release an egg but no sperm, and it's going to be a male. So males are direct descendants of the queen, and you have to be careful that new queens don't mate with their own males. But bees have got that worked out as well, so it never happens. Sadly for the male bee, if he is one of the ones that manages to mate with the queen, he then dies. Again, we've got male there. Most of the girls going about their business. Still haven't seen one dancing. Oh, there's one dancing. That one doing the shaking. That's a Waggle Dance. And that one is saying if you go out of the hive and fly in roughly 60 degrees to the sun, there's a good food source. So the direction of the waggle, the speed of the waggle, tells you, the bees, which direction to go in and how far to go. They also feed one another a bit of the food so that they know what they're looking for. And bees will ignore a plant just outside the apiary here. If there's a whole tree in flower a mile away, they'll all go to that big tree rather than the ones immediately outside here. Of course, go for it.
So we've got one friend, Laura. She wants to know roughly how many bees are in the hive.
Laura, in this hive, we've got maybe 35,000 bees. If we can pan over to the bigger hive over there, then you can see that that's got lots of honey boxes on, and that one has got upwards of 80,000 bees in. So in winter they die down to about 20,000 bees in a hive to survive the winter. In summer, anything from 30 to 80,000. In summer though, the girls will only live 6 weeks. In winter, of course, they live 6 months. But they work so hard. But luckily, the queen's laying 3,000 eggs a day, so they're soon replaced.
Yeah. We've got another couple of questions from students. So we've got one from Amy who wants to know, does the queen plant the babies in the little hive?
She backs in and she literally glues the egg so it stands upright right in the middle of the cell. And first day it stands upright, then it goes to that angle, then that angle. Third day it lays on its side and hatches. So you can actually look at an egg and tell how long ago it was laid.
And then we've got one from Susan here as well. How many bees does it take to make a jar of honey?
Well, one bee can make a jar of honey, but it would have to go on several 100,000 flights. So if the weather's right and there's lots of flowers, 30,000 bees here. Of that, about 2,000, only about 2,000 actually flying out of the hive, the rest stay in. Those 2,000 bees would take well over a day to make one jar of honey, even in the best conditions. So it's a lot of hard work.
Rory wants to know how quickly the bees reproduce.
If you can tell me what the weather's like, Rory, I'll tell you how quickly they reproduce. In this spring, where we had the 7 weeks of summer, then the bees started reproducing really quickly because there's lots of food about, so they decided they would reproduce because conditions are good. If the weather was terrible for 3 years, they wouldn't reproduce for 3 years. The queen lives up to 5 years. If the weather's really good all summer, they might reproduce 4, 5, 6 times in a summer.
Amy would like to know what determines what bee is the queen. Is it just because she's still there?
I think it was that one. Wasn't that one? It was that one. So, if the queen backs into these cells down here, she'll lay a female egg. It will be fed pollen and honey, and it will turn into a worker. This cell here, which they're starting to make and eventually get that sort of size hanging down, put an egg in there, that will be fed royal jelly throughout its life, and that will grow into a queen. So a queen is a female that's in a special cell and fed royal jelly throughout its life. So it's the cell size and what their food is the baby's given. Can you see this one? Bees, when they start getting worried or the hive's been open a long time, they expose this little gland at the back which releases a pheromone, an air hormone, that tells the other bees that this is home so that they don't get lost. And they put their bottoms up in the air and expose that gland and the Nasonoff gland, just scenting. Bees do a lot by pheromones. all of these females could lay eggs. There'd only be male eggs, of course, because they're not mated, but they don't because the queen releases pheromones that stops their ovaries developing. So the queen actually controls the ability of all the females to lay eggs. The worst thing you can have is lots of female workers laying eggs, because you end up with a hive full of boys. And boys don't do any food hunting, they don't do anything. Let's face it, all boys do is sex if they need it. That's it.
So we've got a question from Will, and it's, what is royal jelly?
Royal jelly is produced from basically where your salivary glands are and some other glands above your mouth for the worker bees, and they secrete these chemicals which are really, really high in proteins apart from anything else, but also have stimulating hormones in them as well. So it's a glandular secretion equivalent to our salivary glands producing a secretion. It's a pleasure. I'm going to put the hive back together again, if that's okay. So we're just going to lift the frames back to where they were. And what nice girls these are. Nobody's decided to sting me yet, which is good. You notice that the frames are all put a certain distance apart. That's one of the most important things in beekeeping. If you don't have them exactly the right distance apart, the bees will start filling the gaps with wild comb, and lifting the frames out becomes impossible. So I use these metal things to keep the frames just the right distance. So don't usually use a lot of smoke, but just at this point we're going to use some smoke because I want to put the bits back together without squishing any bees. And we'll put the honey box back on. And the ceiling internal roof. My spare honey box. And we pop the roof back on. Would you like to see if there's any honey in any of the other ones? Shall we? Let's have a look, see if there is. Let's just see if we've got any honey. We have a frame that's honey, because the bees have covered it with wax. Where it's liquid, it's still mostly nectar. So the bees are going to fill that up, and there's about 2.5 pounds of honey when that's full. So we can feel the weight of that. So these bees are doing quite well filling this up. So in this box there'll be about 30 pounds of honey. You can see this one is full of nectar my side anyway. And then this one I can see has got lots of, they're starting to cap it all. So to get the honey out I use a knife to cut that wax capping off. Then I put it in a spinner and spin the honey off, and that's it. It's as pure as you can get it, just about. Shame we haven't got a spoon so you can have a spoonful of it. What's your question, Dominic? Yes, to all of those questions.
And then we've got fascinating. Mark's asking, hi Bill, as mead is back on trend, do you make mead with your own honey?
Mead?
And will you
My own personal view of mead is I'd rather somebody else drank it. I'm not a fan of mead. I do have friends who make mead, but it's not for me. I do, however, make an awful lot of candles and things out of the beeswax. So, but not mead. Coming back to the other one, the other question, you'll see some bees like those two who are actually licking each other's tongues. And what they're doing is passing chemicals from one another, which communicates and keeps the hive. Yes, they spread the pheromones around the colony to say they belong by doing that. They also do, they've got at least 5 different dances to do different things, because don't forget it's dark inside here. And what they're doing is actually their antennae are feeling what the other bees are doing. So yes, there is a strict social order. And when that girl was born, for the first 2 days she cleaned and tidied comb. The next 2 days she will have fed babies. Next 2 days she will have gone to wax building, then to ventilating and keeping the hive warm, and so on through her life. It's all programmed in, all the different jobs, until eventually, when they're 4 weeks old, they get to fly out and get some food. So, yes. Am I carrying on? Well, shall we just have a quick look at the swarm we picked up off the roof? So this was a group of bees that were halfway up the wall on Wellington Place number 1 2 weeks ago, I think. So we put them in a box and we just popped the box here. They didn't come from here, so we can have a look, see what they're doing. And the most important question is, have they got a queen laying babies? So I'm just going to take one frame out to have a look. Now, I've not got any babies. I don't think you... Wonder if you have. And the way these bees are moving, they haven't got a queen laying yet. So we'll put that back and wait for the queen to start laying. You can tell by the temper and the way the bees are moving what sort of condition they are. Very often you don't even have to open the hive, you can just sit and watch the bees to see what's going on. So that's the beekeeping at Wellington Place. If there are any more questions, happy to do that. And we'll see where we go from here. Certainly.
So Laura would like to know, what's the difference between a honeybee and a bumblebee?
There's a clue in the name, honeybee. If we take wasps and bumblebees first, what happens is only the queen survives the winter. She'll find a dry place under a shed or in a hedge to just sit there and do nothing all winter. Come spring, the queen wasp or bumblebee starts a new colony, slowly builds up, gets to autumn, makes new queens, everybody else dies. Honeybees, however, live through the winter as a colony, and that's why they make honey, because they've got to feed themselves through the British winter. So honeybees live as a colony and have a permanent residence, as it were.
What happens when spring dies? Do they have replacement honey?
Normally, they will actually replace the queen before she dies. If occasionally an idiot beekeeper like me squishes the queen accidentally, which does happen unfortunately, then they will immediately start making new queens. And they'll make 10 new queens. And the first and best out will nip around and kill the others. So it's a bit brutal. But normally, if the old queen is failing, she's 4 years old, what they'll do is they'll breed a new queen, and then again, a bit brutally, the workers will encircle the old queen and cook her, basically.
Wow.
So
In fact,
you mustn't think of honeybees as individuals.
yeah.
They're not individuals.
Yeah.
The colony is the organism,
Yeah.
and it's what's best for the colony that the decision is made. And again, it's very democratic. The workers are making all these decisions.
Vanessa wants to know what's the best way to get involved with beekeeping?
Best way is to go on a course with a local association. Locally, there's an association in Leeds, Wakefield, Huddersfield, Bradford, Harrogate, 23 local associations in Yorkshire. Get on their website, find out about courses, next year's courses, because we had to cancel all of this year's courses, but next year. And the thing to do is to go on a winter course so that you can get bees in spring, and then you've got the whole summer to learn what you're doing. If you get them if you got them now, you'd probably manage to kill them first winter because you didn't know how to look after them well enough. So
Jav wants to know how long does a honeybee live?
a queen will live up to 5 years. The average is about 3.5 years. A drone will born in May, kicked out to die in September. Male bees, yeah. And then the workers in summer live for about 6 weeks. In winter, slightly bigger workers, bigger fat bodies, they'll live for the 6 months. Yes. Yeah.
Heather wants to know, and I think I asked you this earlier, but you didn't tell me, so let's see if you'll answer this for Heather. How long have you been beekeeping for?
I started beekeeping in 1984, so do the math yourself.
A wee while, but not that long.
But not that long. I'm not born to it.
And Laura wants to know how much does it cost to keep bees?
The setup is relatively expensive, although compared to a new bike nowadays, not so much. It's going to just do your training, to get your hive, to get your bees, to get your bee suit. You're not going to get much change from £700.
Okay.
But after that, it took me 3 years to break even. And okay, now I've got 100 hives and I make money out of it.
Yeah.
But it is a hobby that actually can eventually pay for itself.
Yeah, you should eventually break even.
Yeah.
And figuring there might be some supplement kit out there that people might be able to get hold of.
You're better off buying new kit if you can.
Yeah.
And kit has actually got cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah.
So now is probably as cheap as it's ever been.
Oh, good time to start.
Yeah.
I think that is the end of all of our questions. So thank you very much, Phil. That was absolutely fascinating. And anything else?
No.
No? Any more questions from the team? No, there we go. So thanks very much. That's a wrap. And thank you from the Wellington Place beehive. We'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.